tuned in to the Community Cats podcast. Ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Community Cats podcast. I'm your host, Stacy LeBaron. I've been involved helping homeless cats for over 30 years with the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. The goal of this podcast is to expose you to amazing people who are improving the lives of cats. I hope these interviews will help you learn how you can turn your passion for cats into action. Today, we're speaking with Jacklyn Ellis. Jacklyn is board certified by the Animal Behavior Society as a certified applied animal behaviorist. She's certified in shelter behavior by the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants and is the director of behavior at the Toronto Humane Society. She earned her PhD in animal welfare at the Atlantic Veterinary College, University of Prince Edward Island, where she conducted research on methods for reducing stress in shelter cats. Her work has been published widely in peer-reviewed journals and has presented at many national and international conferences, particularly on feline stress and elimination behavior. She has recently authored 2 chapters for a new edition of the leading textbook on behavior and welfare of shelter animals. Dr. Ellis also developed and validated a suite of ordinal rating scales to monitor feline behavior and welfare, which have revolutionized case management practices at the Toronto Humane Society. These scales demonstrated to have excellent inter-observer reliability following a structured training program, have enabled the team to evaluate intervention outcomes efficiently and effectively, dramatically improving both the quality of life and adoptability of cats in their care. The associated training is now available for free to the public at the link we will put in the show notes, and it offers a CEU from both the CCPDT and the IAABC. Passionate about sharing this transformative tool, Dr. Ellis has presented on its development through Maddie's Fund and published it on the IAABC Foundational Journal. This system is also ideally suited for tracking the success or failure of feline socialization efforts for those in-betweener cats for which adoption is deemed potentially suitable, making it especially relevant to community cats, podcast listeners, and anyone working to improve outcomes for shy or fearful cats. Jacklyn, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan and I'm really excited to be here.
So before we jump right into all this in-betweener cat and feline behavior information, how'd you get to be so passionate about cats?
Well, I always had cats growing up, but the moment I always think about was when I was in grade 2, I took a book out of the library on cat behavior. And when I returned it, the librarian said to me, "Oh, what did you think of the book, Jackie?" And I said, "I loved it. I want to research cats where I grew up." And she said, "Aw, that's not a job." And then I realized later, once I did my PhD, that I showed her that is a job, and I found it.
Wow, that's an incredible journey because so many people, they're like, well, we kind of found it here, we found it here, there, and there, everywhere. And then you've just said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make it happen. So what a determined person you are from a very young age. You've got a clear vision and drive and interest. And I think that's absolutely fantastic because, again, so many of us have this very wandering journey and focusing on feline behavior. How did you get to the Toronto Humane Society?
After school, I started working with Nestle Purina, they do some research on product development on ways to improve their products from the pet's point of view. And so I did work with them on ways to ensure that, the cat litter was cat approved and that we were advocating for some of the best practices. So my job was it was in the animal welfare department and also helping mostly with cat litter products. And I really did love working for them. But you don't typically get your PhD in animal welfare without wanting to go back to sheltering eventually. And also I wanted to move back to the Toronto area, which is where I'm from. And so it was just a perfect opportunity that I was able to find this job at Toronto Humane Society. It ticked all my boxes.
So what's it like being a feline behaviorist for a humane society? It seems like, we should all know what that means. But does your job description look the same as a feline behaviorist job description for another organization, or is it very unique?
That's a great question, and I'd really love the answer to it as well. But I would have to imagine that we're all a little bit different. I think that Because of my background, I am very fortunate at Toronto Humane Society, at least, to be given the opportunity to probably do a little bit more research than a lot of people who are primarily in charge of the cats in their population and in their foster homes. So I am able to run projects to see, if we do this or do that, can we actually improve the cat's behavior from a scientific perspective? Can we show that? So I'll run lots of experiments saying, if I do this particular intervention with half of the cats who are expressing this behavior and this intervention with half the cats expressing this behavior, which one do we get better outcomes from? So I would imagine that my job right now, it seems to be about half and half managing our cat population and our case managers, managing some cases myself, and half really more this research-focused opportunity to try to make more bigger picture changes that we can implement at Toronto Humane Society, and also to present at different conferences and publish on, so that other organizations that might not really have that position in their organization, that they can gain that information as well.
I'm so intrigued about how to manage or understand feline behavior in a sheltering setting, as well as human behavior in a sheltering setting. So, you were talking about looking at different interventions with feline behavior. So, say a cat in a small cage versus a cat in its own private room, and trying to understand what the differences in their behavior would be, versus saying how to make something look more appealing to a human being. How do you make that cat look more adoptable to a human being? Do you put a purple bow on the door to make it like, ooh, who's in there? Is this something special? So there's like this marketing component to it. And then there's the educational component. And then there's the actual cat themselves and understanding the inner being of that cat and their personality in a particularly stressful environment. So in your role as a feline behaviorist and helping facilitate getting these cats into homes, what are the deep questions that you ask yourself?
Well, first, something that jumped to mind that's really interesting from the way that you put that, thinking if we really want the potential adopters to have a wonderful experience and we want the cats themselves to have a wonderful experience. One thing that I did implement at Toronto Humane Society with both those things in mind, but also looking at a third component, that's how can we do all of that for free? Right? What can we do that can make this low cost, no cost, maybe even income generating? Is I started a project. So far, we've only done a couple of rooms this way, but it's just such a wonderful partnership that we'll partner with bigger organizations. Like I think we have one with Royale right now. We have one with Amazon right now, where we'll have a room that we can keep cats in. And we'll have the organization sponsor the room and redo it all. So we'll tell them what we really want is raised, elevated platforms. We want some hiding boxes. We want this. We want that. Here's all the things that we want for the cat. Now you go and do something with all of that to brand it. And so then they make this beautiful room that incorporates all of the elements, the enrichment elements that we want for the cats. But they get to advertise their product, and the clients will come in and see a beautiful space, which is much more engaging for them to interact with, which would make them presumably more likely to adopt or at least have a good experience and tell others about what a good experience they had, bringing even more people in the door to come look at our cats who are hopefully exhibiting more adoptable behaviors because we're catering to their needs with the enrichment we're putting in that room.
That's excellent. That's bringing the store into the shelter.
Exactly.
Rather than moving the cats out and putting them into a retail environment that is designed for people. This is putting the people in a retail environment designed for cats.
Yeah, and more than a retail environment, it's almost more like a whimsical brand experience, because you don't usually see the types of setups. Like our Royale room, it has like a whole, it looks like a house, and they've got like different rooms that they can interact in. So you see a cat like lying in a little bathtub. That's obviously not a real bathtub, but you can't help but smile when you see that, right? Instead of a cat bed, it's just like a plain, normal cat bed. You see this adorable, whimsical little created room, which I think is just so cute.
And fun for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fun for everyone to enjoy and to be able to take part in that. So tell me a little bit about Toronto Humane Society, just positioning. How many cats do you adopt out in a year?
Surprisingly, I actually don't know that number off the top of my head. I will say that it's probably smaller than a lot of other organizations that are kind of as well known, at least, as we are. I think a lot of that is almost purposeful. Once upon a time, our whole focus was the adoption. We are a shelter, we adopt out animals. But we're a humane society, not just a shelter. And so within the last 5 years or so, we've kind of purposely shifted a little bit towards being more of a focus on preventative care, keeping animals out of shelters, keeping them with the pet parents that already have this wonderful human-animal bond with. So we provide a lot of, low-cost or no-cost, sometimes veterinary for public, as well as not just spay-neuter, not just microchip vaccination, also some wellness care. We also do a lot of urgent care. So people who are fleeing domestic violence or are experiencing temporary homelessness, who can board their cats with us or dogs with us while they're experiencing what they need to do. And then when they're finished, they can reclaim their pets from us. We also do a lot of pet food banks, and as well as not just food, but all the supplies they need, and a lot of outreach clinics pop up where we got to go right into the communities. For example, if we find we're getting a lot of, animals with parvo from a particular area, we'll do some outreach in that area to see if we can provide preventative care and see if there's any other animals that might also be experiencing this infectious disease in that area, and see if we can go right out to the community and treat them before they get worse, before they come to us, and stop the outbreak from getting a little further.
So tell me about this rating scale that you have for cats. I will be honest. I have mixed emotions about giving a 3 or a 4 or some sort of a label to a cat based on an evaluation. And so I'm eager to have this conversation with you to be convinced how this can be beneficial to our organizations, whether they're rescue organizations or in shelters or, because at the end of the day, we want more cats to be able to go into their homes. So I'd love to learn more about how you are using this rating scale and specifically what it is.
Sure, absolutely. I am so passionate about this project that I'm very happy to answer this question. So obviously, behavior assessments, especially kind of these structured behavioral tests, are increasingly debatable about their efficacy, about whether they can translate to what behavior in a subsequent home might be like. And that is absolutely true. 100% agree with that. That's not exactly what this is. So the idea is, when I first started at Toronto Humane Society, obviously, I'm being asked to take care of the well-being of the cats in their population. First thing I do is I look around and I say, okay, well, what are the resources I have so far? So I can see where we're starting to see where I want to go. And what I found is we had just so many amazing volunteers that were spending countless hours interacting with our cats and writing essays about how it went. And they were fantastic. And they were so cute. It was impossible for me to read them all. And they weren't necessarily giving me the information that I actually wanted. So if they would say something like, oh, she's getting better, I'd say, okay, well, better at what? And is better good? Or they'd say, she let me touch her. And I'm like, okay, did she like it when you touched her? Or they'd say, I wiggled the string and I gave her a treat. Okay, well, did she play with the string? And then did she eat the treat? Right? So I wanted to have this sort of information. And I wanted to think about how I wanted to get it from them. And I thought, if they can translate the exact pieces of information that I want to know into a numeric value, then I can look at the values really quickly on my favorite thing in the world, a graph. And then when they dip below a certain mark, that's when I can go through and really, that's like a flag for me to be looking at this behavior a little bit more intentionally and investigating more about what they're saying about these cats. Whereas if we're seeing the cats getting 10s across the board, so they say, that's probably, the cat's probably fine, right? And so I decided to pick a few specific behaviors that are what I really wanted to know. So they were, how well is the cat eating? We all know that skin appetence can be a huge hallmark indicator of welfare problems in cats. Of course, it can mean other things as well, but that is going to be a big problem. I wanted to look at just general behaviors of fear, and I decided to go with the fear, anxiety, and stress scale from the Fear Free program. I adapted it just ever so slightly. It's not even really changed. I just defined it a little bit for our purposes in the shelter to make sure that we could get really precise answers. It's not really designed to be precise. They often recommend saying the cat was a 2 to 3, but I wanted a 2 or a 3. So I just kind of worked with it a little bit there. And then I want to know, does the cat enjoy petting? How does the cat respond to attempts at petting? And so I created a scale. And and then the last one was participation in play. So is the cat participating in play? And if so, how enthusiastically? And so I created these 0 to 5 scales for the other 3 behaviors. So response to petting, participation in play, and food intake. And then I trained a number of volunteers on this system. I created this this long training program. It's an hour on each of the scales. and then time for questions and answers. And then they do a little test after. And the test is just basically looking at, hey, if I was going to give this cat a 4, would your 4 look the same? So I'm just obviously, it's garbage unless it's meaningful, these numbers. And so I looked to see if there was inter-observer reliability between the different scores. And I actually found just shockingly good inter-observer reliability, which is they were so good. And so I was really confident that these numbers were meaningful. So then, in turn, I could use these numbers to measure whether our interventions were being effective. So if I, let's say, had a cat that was really, really shy and shut down, and I decided to start a behavior modification plan to increase their enjoyment of human touch, right? A desensitization and counter conditioning to touch plan. Is it working? Right? Real quick way to check that is to look at their response to petting. Obviously, we say if this cat doesn't like petting, don't actually touch them. But we can look to see person's not actually comfortable touching, person's not actually comfortable touching. Someone tried, got a 3. 3 is not good. We want to see 2 or lower. And then someone didn't try. Someone tried and they got a 1. All right, things are working. And then that gets down to a 0 and things like that. And the same with lots of other ways we look at the score. So that's just one type of intervention. That's our desensitization and counter conditioning. A lot of our shy, fearful cats, particularly if they come from hoarding or outdoors environments, one thing we love to try is giving them a social companion, right? So if we introduce another cat into the room, what is the difference in their score from before that cat was introduced into the room to after, or perhaps they're started on some sort of psychopharmaceutical by one of our veterinarians? Our veterinarians always want to come back and say, is it having the desired effect, which is a responsible way to practice medicine. But if I just say, I don't know, I think so, it's hard to say. I feel like maybe that's not a very good answer. If I can look at the scores and say, actually, here's the graph, here's the line of when the medication started, you can see that their scores are very high. Then they got the medication and now their scores are very low. That medication is working. So not only is it really, really valuable in helping us effectively evaluate whether our interventions are having the desired effect, that it also helps us to be more efficient in future case management, because now we know, all right, so we had a similar case previously. What did we do that actually worked? And we'll look back and we can say, bingo, it was giving them a social companion. And then maybe I'll try starting with the social companion on the next approach, because it might not be the same thing with this cat, but at very least previous evidence suggests it worked with a cat that at least was presenting similarly. So to me, it just made my decision-making process much more easy. The cat was telling me. I was just the one writing it down.
Valuable information, incredible information, actually. Do you share this information with adopters? Because sometimes when cats get adopted, go to the home, they can revert or regress backwards a little bit. And then could they utilize some of these tools in the home as they get the cat more adapted to the home environment?
So that's a really interesting question. So far, we haven't shared the scale with the adopters, but we do share the technique that worked. So if, let's say, we found that the cat really came out of its shell with a social companion, sometimes we'll bond the cat to the other cat, or we'll suggest that the cat has to be adopted at least to a home with another cat. Or sometimes we find once they had that other cat with them for a bit, they didn't even need that other cat anymore. They just trusted us now. And so, but we'll still say, just so you know, this cat really likes other cats. Might want to consider that. But we also, in cases where it was really the desensitization and counter conditioning plan, we will share the plan that we used with them so they can have the step-by-step. Now, hopefully they don't revert, as we know, we always expect a cat to revert a bit when they go to a new home. But hopefully it'll come to the point where they don't have to start from scratch.
Right. Oh, exactly. And I mean, and the tips of like this cat, you can do anything to them if they're eating this food, right? Or, there's something. So there'll be all the tips for success. Because you always want to set up those adoptions in a very successful light.
Confident, compassionate, certified. If you're ready to make a real difference for community cats, it all starts with the right training. Join us this weekend for the next TNR certification workshop, presented by Neighborhood Cats and hosted by us, the Community Cats Podcast. This expert-led interactive online event will walk you through everything you need to know, from planning a trapping project and using the right equipment, to colony care, dealing with tough neighbors, and working with spay-neuter clinics. Whether you're just getting started or want to sharpen your skills, this workshop will help you trap smarter and save more lives. All attendees receive a digital certificate after passing a brief quiz, plus access to a private Facebook group for ongoing support, along with extensive handouts and resources. Can't make it live? We got you. Registration includes access to the full recording and all handouts. Get all the details and register now at communitycatspodcast.com/TNR. That's communitycatspodcast.com/TNR.
Do you love crazy cat ladies? I do. The Animal Rights Foundation supports national rescue transports of dogs and cats, protects and rescues horses and livestock, and advances animal advocacy nationally. Become a member by visiting animalrightsfoundation.org.
It's estimated there are hundreds of thousands of cats living outside in New York City, over 500,000. And the wild thing? They've always been here, right underfoot. We just haven't been paying attention.
It is cats everywhere. I am very heartbroken.
It starts with one cat, and before you know it is another one, and then one is really sick. I started making phone calls. Can somebody come pick them up?
Rain, snow, or shine. How they survive is beyond me.
Think about feeding 29 cats every morning. I couldn't afford to do that.
This isn't just a story about cats. It's about systems, about poverty, housing, burnout, and what happens when we're forced to build something better from the ground up. From Flatbush Cats, this is Underfoot, a new podcast uncovering New York City's cat crisis and how we can fix it together. Follow now wherever you listen.
In a recent study, 97% of respondents said that pets are family. Communities can play a vital role in helping to keep families together, whether it's reuniting lost pets with their owners, donating pet supplies or funds for pet owners in need, or offering short or long-term fostering. People can help keep pets and their people together. We just have to show them how. Did you know there are resources you can use to help bring attention to the programs you offer to help them do just that? From public service announcements, short videos, printable posters, online and social graphics, and much more. Find your resources at www.petsandpeopletogether.org/campaign-resources. #be a helper. When a cat is brought in to your organization, I would assume that there's an intake exam that's done. And when you do it for the physical, for the health, I would assume also now for the behavioral. So that's where they're starting their behavioral baseline. Have you seen dramatic changes from that intake sort of behavioral bias to what the cat ends up being on the other side?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of different, let's call them presentations. So we all have known that one cat is just super chill on day one, and it continues to be super chill till they go home day. So that cat is not your standard cat, but not rare. We see those cats pretty frequently. But I would say most of the cats we see probably come in and are shy and scared for between 1 and 3 days before they start to show a little bit more of their true personality. And that mirrors some of the research that you can see in the literature. There's a famous, I think it's Kessler and Turner paper that shows they use the cat stress score. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It's very similar to the FAS score, except for it's 1 to 7 instead of 0 to 5. And in their paper, they showed, I believe it was 3 to 5 days is the time it takes most cats to get down to kind of an acceptable and kind of plateaued level of stress. And we see that mirrored here in the shelter. And then, of course, there's those other cats that it takes much longer, or perhaps it just doesn't happen for them. And so for those cats, we'll often look to their intake notes where possible, if they came from an owner surrender. And if we see they were lovely in a home, but they are not flourishing in a shelter, these would be cats that we really prioritize for foster. Get them out to somewhere where their welfare can be best served. And also, we'll be able to get better pictures, better videos, more likely to be able to get them adopted if they're not on the premises, if they're showing their true self. And that way we'll be able to advertise them a little bit better and describe them a little bit better while still serving their needs at the same time. But of course, cats that we don't have an intake information from, so perhaps they came in as stray or came in from a colony or something like that, we do still have somewhat of an intake form for them. We prioritize collecting behavior information from stray intakes even. Some people will say, I just found this cat. I don't know anything about them. How can I give you behavior information? But of course you can. How'd you get it here? Did you trap it? Did you pick it up and put it in the carrier? Did you lure it into the carrier? Even that much information really, really helps me. How long have you seen it in the area? Were you feeding it? Did it let you pet it? And if you did pet it, do you think you enjoyed it? There's so much information that we can get there that we might not be able to know the difference between a fearful and an unsocialized cat when they first are there for those first 3 to 5 days, for a lot of cats are showing those types of behaviors. Yeah, so that would be some great places to get that type of information.
So you mentioned foster homes there. So for cats that go to foster homes, you will also do this plan if needed?
Yes, absolutely. We're spoiled for foster parents. We have so many amazing, amazing cat foster parents, particularly, who I am always blown away by how much they are willing to do in terms of how much work they're willing to put up with, quote unquote. But like, I don't know, I guess when I first started, I thought, people who foster dogs really want to train. People who foster cats just want to cuddle. But I'm always flabbergasted by the thirst they have for more information and for more ability to implement some of these training strategies. So we do have some videos of how we implement our desensitization and counter conditioning to touch plan. And then depending on the individual, and have them to use the scales as well. The scales for some of our more tech savvy foster parents, I'll share a Google Doc with them and they'll be happy to enter that data every single day. For some other people, I just ask them on the phone. I send them the scale and I'll say, which one of these numbers do you think they were most like in terms of petting or in terms of their fear, anxiety, and stress? And so I really try to tailor it to the particular foster parent. But some people are so keen. Those Google Sheets are kept up to date more frequently than I would ever do if I was a foster parent. So I'm always blown away.
How many cats at a time are you able to kind of supervise?
So it really varies. So the number of cats that are on a behavior modification plan, and so as I mentioned, every cat at the shelter has a standard training and enrichment plan. So those cats, they're all kind of 10s across the board. I'm not necessarily supervising their cases. The ones that are having these extra behavior plans that we're collecting this data for, it really depends how many are a need in the shelter. So sometimes there's only 3 on the plan. Sometimes there's 23 on the plan. So we're spoiled at Toronto Humane Society. We're also having a shelter trainer on our staff. So she is a shelter specifically feline trainer. And she case manages most, if not all, of these cases. And then the actual training is done by our feline behavior specialist volunteer rung, which all of them have undergone this special training with me. I think we have something like 135 of them right now at last check. I don't know how many of them are actually active right now, but it is a very popular volunteer program. I think it's because there's kind of like a community to it in that we do these online trainings and everyone knows each other's names and there's a lot of interaction. And the fact that they are able to see the impact of their work, not just through seeing the cat day after day or week after week, depending on how often they come, but actually seeing these graphs too. It's funny how much of a difference it makes to people because they can see, wow, we did this. Look at what we did. And so I think there's a real sense of satisfaction with that ability as well.
Excellent. What is life like for community cats in Toronto?
I'll say we don't have as many community cats as a lot of other places in the world that I have gone. I think this is owing to a couple of things. One is the weather, the climate. We really just don't have as much breeding time of year as a lot of other places in the world do. And then also really successful TNR efforts. We still have community cats, but the populations are much, much lower than they used to be. And then something interesting, I don't know if you consider a barn cat a community cat, but I will say that we do utilize a barn cat program for some of our less socialized cats that cannot be returned to where they came from for one reason or another. And it's interesting. It is, I think because we're in Toronto, which is an urban area, a lot of quote unquote city kids. No shade on city kids. I'm a city kid myself, but I think they just have a bit and I think this is changing over time, but there can be a bit of a different opinion of a barn cat, what that means to the cat for their welfare, for their well-being, to a person who's like a city kid or a person who's a country kid. Anyone who grew up in the country knows barns have cats. Those cats have great lives. I love my barn cat. My barn cat loves me, or maybe it doesn't. It has so much fun living in the barn. It has shelter. We feed it every day. It's fat and happy. But sometimes if you grow up in the city, you might think, oh, that poor cat has to live in a barn. That's not as good a life as living in a home. And I mean, I think there are pluses and minuses to both environments. Obviously, there is more risks to any cat that goes outside, of course, with predation and the weather. But as long as you're doing your best to make sure that these placement locations provide, winterized cat dens, they provide your food. They're not being placed in areas where the predation is known to be high. And there's lots of protective things in place. The enrichment they get from running around that barn, scaling the walls, climbing the rafters, chasing the mice, it can be really lovely and a really lovely place to live. And so that is one thing I think about when I think about the difference of community cats, if you count barn cats as community cats, in my neck of the woods versus a few other places in the world. It's just, when I speak to a lot of my American colleagues about these types of programs, they just talk about how wonderful they are, that they've really made such a big difference for their populations, which is undeniably true, and how universally accepted they are. And I think sometimes in this area of the world, there can be a little bit of hesitance to utilize these programs quite as much.
I think it might have something to do with the fact that the overall cat population is not at the high levels that it is in other areas, because in New England, we don't have the cat population situation that you would have in the south of the United States. And so, sometimes we'll have barns looking for cats, but there really isn't much of a supply for them out there. And so you have to travel between different states to get barn cats. You have to go down to New Jersey to get barn cats for Vermont, or you just have to kind of network. It's not like, oh yeah, I'll get a couple of kittens over from the farm around the corner and that kind of thing. So it is a little bit different in terms of, it's not usually a volume program. It's more of very case by case. And in some cases, at least here in New England, they'll have cats go to barns that have litter box issues that have not been able to be resolved. So they're super friendly. So they can go to a barn that has, say, like a horse riding program when there's lots of kids around and attention. So the friendly cat will go to that barn, and the world is its litter box, right? And so it has worked out very well for all the parties involved. And then there are the Shire cats. And you can do a group of like 6 of them if you have a rodent problem and you want to deal with the rodent problem that way. So there's a variety of different feline behaviors that work depending on the type of barn situation or greenhouse or brewery. So there's, and not all barns are alike, or not all working cat operations are alike either. So there's a lot of due diligence, just like any adoptive home is not the same too. You talked about feline enrichment, and I swear, I think if we talk to folks about that have indoor-only cats or planning to adopt indoor-only cats, and we talked about feline enrichment, what percentage of the population would even know what we're saying?
Yeah, I bet it's lower than you'd like.
And even from my perspective, I mean, I've been in the business for a long time, and I'm like, oh, the laundry list of things that I should have done with my cats over all the years, I now feel terribly guilty for the ones that stayed indoors. I had like a hybrid household. So I had some cats that wanted to go out and come in, and then I had other cats that stayed in all the time. And I'm like, those poor cats, I just didn't do anything for, I didn't do what I should have done for them in the house. So there's a learning curve that has to go on with those indoor only houses too, because we're not providing for them what their needs really are. So I think that's like, people say it's year of the cat in the veterinary space, but I also think in the feline behavior space, it's got to be year of the cat too, because so many of our cats need that enrichment desperately in the indoor environments.
Absolutely agree. And I think so often of that when we get a Bengal and someone's looking to adopt a Bengal, I'm like, okay. So yes, you can adopt a cat, but I need you to know this is a dog in a cat's body. You need to make sure that you're doing agility, that you're doing this, that you're doing that. Get them some warming water, get them this, get them that, or else you're going to have no curtains.
Right.
The cat really needs that enrichment.
Right. Yeah, the border collie of the cat world, right? And so as a feline behaviorist, I mean, what are your greatest challenges right now?
I would say the cases that I struggle the most with, at least, are those cats that come in and they have exhibited what you might be diagnosed by a veterinary behaviorist, at least, as conflict aggression. So these are those cats that are super lovely a lot of the time. And then in certain situations, they're going to turn, and the violence that they're going to exhibit can be quite scary, and it can feel unpredictable. So to them, it's logical. And like in retrospect, you can understand it. but it's not something that is easy to predict. It's not something like, oh, every time it sees a big mouth Billy Bass, it is aggressive. Oh, just get rid of the big mouth Billy Bass and you'll be fine. These are situations that are usually unavoidable. So if, for example, one of the cats I worked with was every time the adopter, actually it was the foster parent, every time the foster parent walked out of their bedroom, if the cat was in this specific location, it's not just, movement-based aggression or play aggression. It was really inflicting a lot of danger. And some of these situations so that one, it was a specific cat tree. We just moved it and it was much less of a problem. Now, it still had that behavior in some other circumstances, but with the degree of injury that people can sustain from some of these situations and the oftentimes inability to change the circumstances, you can't just move the cat tree in those the situations. Those ones are really difficult cases. And often we will consult with veterinary behaviorists. We will be utilizing psychopharmaceuticals, but sometimes the risk is still just so high that those can be heartbreaking cases because it's hard to know what the ethical thing to do is.
Yeah. I used to call them, there's the Jekyll and Hyde cats. And then there's also the dive bombing cats. And so over the years, I've seen a lot of behaviorally challenged cats. And it's funny because over the years, you just get really, I'm very stubborn. And you sit there and I had one shelter manager. We had a cat that just had so much anger in it, so much anger. And she just sat next to that cage and we're going to figure this out together. We're going to figure this out together. This cat was 6-7 years old, never been outside in its life, dealing with a lot of emotional trauma, total PTSD cat, and went to a barn and was great.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh, yeah. And this cat was tearing apart washcloths, bleeding gums upon entry. So it went from horrible to, we're going to figure this out. It's okay. And it was a 3 to 4 month process. It was not pretty. But at the end, we discovered the needs of the cats through a lot of trial and error. I'm not going to say it was all pretty. There was a lot of trial and error, but we discovered what was the vision that cat wanted and worked out. That cat was living with a family with a child. It was like a 7-year-old child, but the cat was in their barn out back and was fine. And it was the walls of the shelter was one of the biggest triggers. But then we'd have cats in foster homes, but then they would be the dive bombing cats. So they'd be at the top of the stairs or they'd dive bomb on the person's head or whatever. So you have these different feline triggers and they all approach from different angles. And it's really pet detective. A lot of cat detective work, right? You're putting yourself in the mind of that cat, trying to see through their eyes to truly understand. And maybe there is, a no other option out there. I'm not going to say that doesn't have to happen. But I do think that there's a lot of options and alternatives too out there.
Absolutely. I love how you give all of these super serious problems the cutest names. The dive bombers, the Jacklyn Hydes, and stealing these terms from you. I hope that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because we'd have categories of cats, right? With a free roaming cat shelter, of course, there's got to be a few sprayers in there, right? We love them dearly, but we have to find the right place for them. And oftentimes they may have just been spraying in the shelter. They wouldn't as an only cat in the house. They're not going to be a sprayer. So they just have to get retrained in the house environment. So that was always my challenge, was telling adopters, this is the way they are here today, right? The strange, odd, old, and dysfunctional, right? This is what I've got for you today. But you can bring them home and make them, awesome, beautiful cats, right? And so that's sort of was the party line that we had here. All right, Jacklyn. So folks are interested in finding out more about the Toronto Humane Society. How would they do that?
TorontoHumaneSociety.com is a fantastic resource to find out about our different programs and what we've got going on. And then, of course, my course for my scales, I believe you said it's going to be in the notes for the podcast, but it is TorontoHumaneSociety.com/feline behavioral ordinal rating scales, which is a long mouthful. But come on by our website and check out what we got going on.
Excellent. Anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I have a couple of new papers coming out. Well, one just came out, but another is just about to come out on follow-ups on cats that had questionable socialization, those cats where we think, is barn placement appropriate for this cat or return to field or TNR? Or are they're showing just enough progress that you're not sure if they should be going the adoption track or the non-adoption track, other loud outcome track, trying to see did we do right by these cats? So these are the cats in that group that did end up going the adoption pathway to see if that indeed was in their best interest or not. So the one on adult cats is already published. The one on kittens is just in final reviews by the journal at present. So watch this space for those. And if you'd have me, I'd be happy to come back and talk about those.
Excellent. Well, Jacklyn, I want to thank you again for agreeing to be a guest on the show, and we will definitely have you on in the future.
Oh, my pleasure. Lovely to see you.
That's it for this week. Please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. We love to hear what you think, and a 5-star review really helps others find the show. You can also join the conversation with listeners, cat caretakers, and me on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single show. Thanks for listening, and thank you for everything that you do to help create a safe and healthy world for cats.